On a shattered post-apocalyptic Earth, the remnants of humanity cling to survival in primitive tribes, stripped of technology and haunted by monstrous beasts whose deadly disease turns victims into terrifying mutants. Savin, a young hunter, wasn't one to follow rules. Frustrated with the elders' strict boundaries, he decided to push beyond the safe hunting grounds they had assigned. He thought the elders were too scared to take risks, their caution leaving the tribe weak and hungry. But his rebellion didn't go unnoticed. Chief Yuri, Savin's father, found him and was furious. Leaving the safe zone wasn't just reckless, it could endanger the whole village. Savin, however, was determined to prove himself. He wanted to show he could be the best hunter, worthy of leading the tribe one day. Yuri, torn between anger and pride, decided to give his son a chance. They ventured deeper into the forest together, far beyond where any of their people dared to go. Along the way, they ran into Caleb, another hunter from their tribe who had been tracking prey. Yuri warned them they were going too far, but the sound of an animal nearby made him pause. Against his better judgment, he let them go a little farther. What they found was unlike anything they had ever seen. A massive, mutated sloth, its shape was warped and menacing. Yuri chose Savin to lead the attack, a decision that hurt Caleb as he was the one who spotted it. But there was no time for arguments. Together, the group worked to bring the beast down. It was a brutal fight, the creature far stronger than any of them, but their teamwork prevailed. With the beast slain, Yuri declared that the heart of the animal, prize of the hunt, would be shared between Savin and Caleb. But the victory was short-lived. Out of the shadows, a friend stumbled toward them, his body twisted and his skin discolored. He was already transforming into one of the mutants. Desperate, he begged for a quick death. Savin froze, unable to act, but Yuri didn't hesitate. His spear struck with precision, ending the man's suffering. Savin's relief turned to anger. He couldn't understand how his father could be so cold. The group decided to return to the village, their spirits heavy with what they had seen. But as they made their way back, they were unaware that someone was following them. In the shadows, a mysterious man named Amal watched their every move. Doral rushed to greet Savin as he returned to the village, her eyes shining with admiration for his bravery. But nearby, Caleb bristled with jealousy. Miru, his sharp-tongued sister, noticed and couldn't resist teasing him, hinting that he didn't stand a chance with someone like Doral. Yuri, burdened by the dangers they had encountered, immediately went to the elders. He pleaded with them to move the tribe to a safer place. The mutants were getting closer, and staying put seemed like a death sentence. But the elders refused, clinging to the belief that they had always been safe here. They argued that there was nowhere else to go and left their fate to divine will. Caleb, unwilling to let fear decide his life, spoke up. He wanted to choose his own path, like his father Jarrett had when he left the village in search of truth. But the elders dismissed him, pointing out that Jarrett's quest had only led to his death. Even Yuri agreed. The world beyond the village, he said, held nothing but disease and destruction. Still, Caleb couldn't shake his father's memory. Later that night, he confided in Miru about his plan to leave and find answers for himself. She didn't believe in his dream, but couldn't stop him. Caleb slipped away into the night, determined to uncover what lay beyond. But as soon as he reached the river, he saw them, mutants, dozens of them, marching straight for the village. Caleb raced back, his warning coming just in time for the warriors to prepare. When the mutants attacked, chaos erupted. The villagers fought with everything they had, managing to take down some of the beasts. But there were too many. The elders shouted for everyone to retreat into a hidden cave, their only chance at survival. Inside the chaos, Savin witnessed a horrifying scene. His father, Chief Yuri, was overwhelmed by the mutants. The beasts tore into him, and there was nothing Savin could do. The elders, desperate to save those they could, ordered the cave sealed. The younger boys obeyed, closing the entrance, leaving Savin, Caleb, and Doral trapped outside. A mutant lunged at Doral. Caleb acted quickly, killing it before it could hurt her. But despite his bravery, it was Savin she turned to for comfort. The three of them hid behind a large rock, watching helplessly as the mutants searched for a way into the cave. Savin wanted to fight back, his anger and grief pushing him to take action. But Caleb had a different idea. Staying here was a death sentence. He argued. They had to leave, no matter how slim their chances were. Doral agreed. With no better options, Savin reluctantly followed them. After wandering near the river, they paused to catch their breath, and had no idea Amal was silently watching them from the shadows. As Savin rummaged through Caleb's bag, he pulled out an old, dusty book. Caleb hesitated, then explained its origin, a novel from the old world, something his father had used to teach him to read. It was a skill no one else in the tribe possessed. Before they could talk further, the sudden rustling of leaves shattered the moment. A mutant emerged, its grotesque form lurching toward them. Panic set in, and they bolted, running as fast as their legs could carry them. They thought they were safe after putting some distance between them and the creature, but it wasn't enough. The mutant caught up, cornering them with terrifying speed. Savin froze when he saw the beast's face. It was Yuri, his father. The infection had taken him. His grief and shock paralyzed him, and he couldn't bring himself to fight back. Just as the mutant lunged, Amal stepped out of the shadows and struck it down. Amal reminded Savin that whatever it once was, it wasn't Yuri anymore. The group stared at Amal in disbelief as he introduced himself, revealing that he had known Caleb's father, Jarrett. But Amal's questions quickly turned urgent. Were their noses bleeding? Had they been too close to the mutant? He explained that the infection didn't just spread through bites. Breathing near a mutant could infect someone slowly and painfully, though bites made the process much faster. Amal led them across the river to his home, explaining that mutants feared water, making his hideout, a crumbling old building in the ruins, a safe haven. At the ruins, Amal's family greeted them uneasily. His wife, Nina, was furious that Amal had brought potentially infected strangers into their sanctuary. Amal, however, insisted it was worth the risk. Over a tense meal, Amal unraveled a dark truth about the world's downfall. Humanity's arrogance had caused the plague. In their obsession to revive extinct creatures like mammoths and giant sloths, they had also resurrected a deadly ancient disease. Jarrett had uncovered this truth and had created the yellow powder, a rare cure for early-stage infections. But Jarrett had died before he could deliver it to the village, and the cure was stolen by a ruthless man named Gagan. Amal proposed a dangerous mission: travel to the abandoned city where the powder and its formula might still exist. Caleb, with his ability to read, could decipher the secrets that Jarrett had left behind. It was risky, but the group agreed it was their best hope. That night, as the others slept, Nina, suspicious of their guests, bolted the doors. Caleb stirred at a faint noise and turned to investigate, only to find Savin and Doral playfully clapping an intimate moment. Caleb froze, his gaze lingering too long. Doral noticed and locked eyes with him. The unspoken tension grew until Caleb turned away. Back in the cave, tension hung thick in the air as the mutants outside began using weapons they'd scavenged from fallen villagers. They pounded relentlessly against the wood, covering the cave entrance. Miru felt they should act, do something to save themselves, but the elder insisted they pray and wait for divine intervention. This didn't sit well with Remy, who started moving rocks at the back of the cave in search of an escape. The elder scolded him, calling it defiance of God's will. Miru, however, disagreed. Survival wasn't a sin. She joined Remy in clearing the rocks, determined to find a way out. After much effort, they uncovered a narrow tunnel behind the debris. A faint breeze and the sound of trickling water suggested it led somewhere, but the gap was so tight only Miru could squeeze through. She steeled herself and slid into the water, swimming into the unknown. But she quickly retreated, her body covered in leeches that clung to her skin. With Remy's help, she tore them off. Giving up wasn't an option. Summoning her courage, she went back in, pushing through the tunnel until it widened enough for the others to follow. While Miru fought her way forward, the elders at the entrance kept watch on the mutants. One mutant reached through the gaps in the wood, clawing desperately. The elders managed to kill it with a spear, but one of them emerged from the struggle with a bleeding nose, a sure sign of infection. Meanwhile, Miru had made enough progress for Remy and Yomak to join her. They followed the tunnel until they reached the outside world, only to find mutants waiting there. Panic surged and they scrambled back into the tunnel. But in their haste, Yomak slipped and fell hard, his legs snapping with a sickening crack. Yomak knew he couldn't keep up. If they tried to help him, they'd all die. Instead, he insisted on staying behind to buy them time. With a heavy heart, Miru and Remy pressed on, leaving him as bait. His screams echoed briefly before falling silent. The mutants, reluctant to cross the water, didn't follow. Back in the main cave, Miru and Remy returned to a grim scene. Many villagers were sick, their symptoms unmistakable. The elder, now feverish and on the verge of turning, begged for release. Remy froze, unable to act, but Miru didn't hesitate. Taking his spear, she ended the elder's suffering before the mutation could take hold. She turned to the others, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. If the infection took her, she asked them to do the same for her. By morning, Amal and the trio set off to find the yellow powder. They used Amal's raft, and Caleb and Savin struggled to learn rowing since they'd never seen a boat before. As they moved down the river, a group of mutants spotted them from the hills and began hurling rocks. This forced them to row harder, narrowly escaping the barrage. Amal took the opportunity to explain the history of the powder and a brotherhood that once protected it. But everything changed when Gagan ignited a conflict to take control. Amal believed some members of the brotherhood might still exist, so when they reached the shore, he climbed a tall tower to light a beacon, hoping they would see it. Before Amal could finish, mutants closed in fast. He yelled for the trio to flee while he stayed back to fight. Caleb hesitated, not wanting to leave him, but Savin dragged him and Doral onto the raft. As they pushed off, they saw Amal fall into a pit, tangling with a mutant that had leapt in after him. Trapped under the mutant's body, Amal fought fiercely, stabbing it with an arrow. The trio, unaware that the Brotherhood had seen the beacon and was on its way to help, sped downriver, only to notice Doral's nose starting to bleed, a clear sign of infection. Meanwhile, the Brotherhood arrived and pulled Amal from the pit. Amal told them he had found someone who can read, someone worth protecting. But for the trio, their journey led them to the ruins of an old city. They found a community living under a cruel tyranny. The tension heightened when a man, whipped for stealing, fled past them. Caleb and Savin tried to ask him about the powder, but the man panicked, refusing to answer, and bolted. Savin chased him, but lost him in the labyrinth of ruins. When Savin returned, he found Caleb and Doral captured by guards and taken to meet Gagan and his daughter, Giselle. Gagan, bitter and paranoid, refused to share the powder. Caleb revealed his identity as the son of its creator and offered to recreate it. Gagan dismissed him, claiming the powder was for his descendants, but grudgingly allowed Caleb access to the library. Doral, however, was taken to isolation, leaving Caleb on edge. Later, Savin snuck into Giselle's chambers, pleading with her to help. At first, she refused, terrified of her father's wrath. But as Savin told her about the countless survivors in need, and as she remembered her father's cruelty and the truth about how he stole the powder, she decided to help. Giselle led Savin to Gagan's safe, the supposed resting place of the powder. But something felt wrong. The safe was covered in dust, untouched for ages. This didn't match Giselle's claim that her father took powder from it daily. They scoured the room for secret compartments, but found nothing. Giselle, determined to uncover the truth, started formulating a plan. Meanwhile, Caleb dug through his father's old notes in the library. He could read them, but recreating the powder would take weeks. Time was slipping through his fingers as his nose began to bleed. Gagan refused to give Caleb the powder, claiming he couldn't possibly succeed. The tense conversation was cut short when Giselle burst in, saying someone had broken into the other room to steal the powder. Gagan stormed off. He inspected the room, finding it empty but making sure the powder was safe. He revealed its hiding spot, inside a flashlight concealed within the wall. As Gagan turned, Savin attacked, knocking him out cold. She shared the powder with Savin, curing his symptoms. With no time to lose, the two rushed to free Doral. After knocking out a guard, they cured her and handed Savin the flashlight containing the precious powder. Giselle made one last plea for him to continue Caleb's father's work before sending them off. Savin and Doral raced to the library to save Caleb, who was moments from mutating. Another guard tried to stop them, but they fought through, finally curing Caleb. The trio fled the city, but their escape was short-lived. In the forest, a group of Gagan's guards ambushed them. Savin distracted the guards, engaging in a brutal fight that left him dazed and barely conscious. He quickly ran to the river, reaching a raft and rowing desperately until they landed on a distant shore. Exhausted but determined, they climbed into the hills, finding an old, rickety rope bridge. Carefully, they began crossing, but before they could reach the other side, Gagan and his men arrived. An arrow struck Caleb in the leg, and the trio barely made it across. Savin urged Doral to help Caleb move, insisting Caleb was humanity's only hope with his knowledge of the powder. Savin stayed behind, cutting the bridge ropes to stop the guards. Gagan, however, fired 2 arrows, both hitting Savin and sending him tumbling into the gorge below. With no time to grieve, Doral and Caleb pushed through the forest, only to run into Amal and the Brotherhood, who had tracked them by the abandoned raft. Riding horses, the group raced back to the village. The scene was chaos. Mutants were digging under the cave's entrance to reach the tribe. The Brotherhood charged in, quickly killing the mutants while Doral ran inside to distribute the powder. She arrived just in time to stop Miru from ending her life in despair. The battle seemed over, but Gagan appeared, determined to finish things. He aimed an arrow at Caleb, but Amal leapt in front of him, taking the fatal shot. Enraged, Caleb grabbed an axe and hurled it at Gagan, striking him down for good. Days later, after returning Amal to his home, Caleb said goodbye to Doral. Miru had taken on their father's mission, teaching children in the village how to read. With a heavy heart but renewed purpose, Caleb set out for the city, holding on to the hope of saving humanity.